Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming down on a perfect song right before a lovely day. We got our rain out of the way for at least a couple hours. So thank you for providing for James here. I'm excited. Welcome to Lodo Studios. I'm Jacob Tell. I'm the founder of actually a branding company that started in this building, and then the pandemic hit. Big building, we're like, what are we going to do? A bunch of nonprofits needed a space to do their gala events in a virtual sense. So we started to do live streams here and then open it up for photo and video. And then eventually COVID restrictions allowed us to have events. So it's been about 18 months of doing this, and we're here for the community. We've had music events, comedy events, and now community conversations, which I'm very excited about. I'm sure many of you already know James, but I am going to read a little bit of his bio for anyone who's unfamiliar. James is an incredible guy, and I'm glad you're all here for this very important conversation. Thanks for coming, everyone. So James is a proven analytical thinker, speaker, and writer. He's the founder and chief visionary officer of Coffee with the Black Guy, an innovative social impact movement, which he facilitates conversations about race and perspective for community groups and organizations. James is a former award-winning journalist and runner-up in the 2021 Santa Barbara mayoral election, who leverages more than 2 decades of public service and journalism to provide impactful insights for groups and individuals seeking to gain a better cross-cultural understanding. I definitely voted for James. Shout out. All right, some of you did too, that's good. For more than the past decade, James served as district director for California State Senator Annabeth Jackson, who represented nearly 1 million constituents within the Santa Barbara and Ventura counties until terming out December of 2020. In that role, James was responsible for the day-to-day operations representing the senator and her work while liaisoning with constituents and local governments. Prior to working in the public sector, James, a Maryland native, served as a newspaper journalist in several diverse communities across the country, covering a variety of subjects, from education to crime, local politics, features, and more. And I think we're going to hear about the and more right now. Are you ready? Give him a round of applause.
So it's been a while, so I have a little cheat sheet here to keep me on time and on pace. So if y'all see something that's not accustomed to what you're seeing, or either be that Zoom or otherwise, that's what that explanation is. Thanks for being here, and thanks for this weather, whoever ordered this, right? My God. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here to do a quick little explanation of what Coffee with the Black Guy is. Some of you know about it, but you know, be gone for a little bit, be quiet for a little bit. So kind of bring everybody back up to speed on that, and then grab my sweat back here because I know. And then from there, we're just going to kind of give some guiding principles and dive into our conversation. Some of you all were good enough to send some questions ahead of time this morning, last night. So I got those, and we'll fold those in. But short of that, this is an opportunity for us to engage in community. It started back in 2016 because there were things going on, Orlando Castile, Alton Sterling at the time. And nobody in Santa Barbara that I knew we were engaging with was really talking about that. And so I realized that there was a need for folks to engage. We talk in Santa Barbara, we're a smart community. We talk about everything else, we engage about everything else. And so these racial elements were kind of inauthentic when we weren't talking about it. So decided to bring the whole Black Guy office out. And I heard about this thing called Coffee with the Cop, and I understood what they were doing, and they wanted to be seen beyond the uniform, humanize the badge. My uniform, I want to be seen beyond that too. And so there was something very similar to that idea that brought us to Coffee with the Black Guy. So for years, I've been facilitating conversations both in the community and for organizations. And then over the past year, of course, you all heard about the mayoral run, so we had to focus a little elsewhere. And so for the past year, I've been really building up the brand, giving myself grace after a tough mayoral run, but also building up the brand and solidifying where we're going with these kind of conversations to move us forward as a community. where are we at now? So, as I mentioned, for the past several months, I've been doing a lot of facilitation for different specific organizations, be that corporations. So, as you hear this stuff, think in your head, who are you connected to who can utilize such conversations, such engagement, right? Nonprofit organizations, both their boards and the people who they serve. Schools, you know that there's no shortage of issues there. And a variety of other organizations. Anybody who needs to engage and build community and wants to engage other folks in our community. I try to make these conversations accessible. I'm not carrying a PhD. I'm not going to talk to you in academic language. We're talking as people, right? Connecting as neighbors. We're having coffee. Right? It's nothing too serious. And so when I first launched Coffee for Black Guy, I'm like, okay, so how do you facilitate conversations? I knew what I've been doing all of my life since I was in kindergarten, get kicked out because I was speaking up too much. Right? Then I learned some words and some other skills to express myself. And I started to think of I started to think of what are the rules that can help us better understand each other, keep us, give us some parameters as we engage. One is simply be respectful. That may mean different things to different folks. What that means to you, check in with yourself, understand what that might mean to you. Be genuine, right? While you're checking in with yourself on being respectful of what that means to you, understand you're here as your whole self. Show up as who you are, your authentic experience. Be willing to feel something. You can't have these kind of conversations without, this is hard work, right? You've heard about hard work, this is hard work. And so when you're doing your hard work, you've got to be willing to feel something as we move forward. Be willing to listen. We're given one mouth, 2 ears, 2 eyes. So we're observing more than we're sharing, right? Sharing is important, but listening is vital, particularly in these kind of conversations. And finally, don't seek to dominate with your sword. We're all here, we're building community, share space, we have short attention spans. Understand what they tell us, a minute, 30 seconds, pretty much what we have. So as you're thinking, and we'll have some assistance, the good brothers from UCAPA, Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, UCAPA chapter from University of Santa Barbara, or excuse me, UCSB. I'm trying to remember what the letter said. UCSB. But these gentlemen are out helping us, and then Christian will be joining us with the microphone. If you have questions, raise your hand and we'll come to you on that. And finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors, right? You heard the story of what Coffee with the Black Guy is and how it started. Well, you didn't hear anything about money, right? And so what brings these community conversations to people are sponsors stepping up saying that we feel that these conversations are important and we're going to bring this community. So we've got sponsors like Jacob, you heard from him earlier with the Miracom and Lodo Studios. Thank you so much. We've got Brandon Scott back here running the AV and all things essential here with Comfort Food. We have the League of Women Voters, Santa Barbara in the house. Thank you all for your support. We've got Hospice of Santa Barbara. Thank you for your support. Pacific Graduate Institute, Alumni Association. Both those last two that you heard, they've been constant supporters of these conversations, right? And so keep that in mind when we're talking about, we'll get into a little later, I'm sure somebody will have a question about the concept of voting with your dollars or investing with your dollars. Think about who's supporting this kind of work, and does that align with your value systems of what you want to do, right? And so support those who support you. Any other, you heard some of those guiding principles. Anything else that we missed that somebody thinks that we might want to add in to help us stay in balance, whatever that means. But without further ado, we'll get started. We'll open up for some questions, but one of the first ones that one of the ones that I think would be great to start with. Let me go ahead and pull that up. James, I'm hopeful for a conversation about the following question. Are there any circumstances in which it is acceptable for a person who does not identify as Black or African American to utter the N-word? Anybody curious about that? Answer no? No, I agree. The answer is no. That's my answer, right? I'm not saying that I'm the definitive, I don't have all the answers, but my answer to that is no. There is not a time when it's appropriate. But I would not just leave it at that. I'd further extend that thought process and stealing a little bit from Ta-Nehisi Coates, who some of you already know. In his explanation of this, he explained this whole thing of everything is not for everybody. Right? And so if I go up to your spouse and start calling your spouse baby, it'll be a little weird, right? Right? Along those same lines, you question, why would somebody want to use that terminology? For good or bad. But why would someone want to utilize that terminology? And again, when I go back to the principles about being genuine, like looking into yourself, like why would you want to do that? And so the short answer is no, there is never a time that is acceptable. And if we have to look, I am a paper nerd. So before these things, it's not like I don't read research. I read a couple books and refresh myself on things that have been in my mind. But this is the stuff I think about quite often. And particularly on this term, I look back at hip hop. You understand hip hop culture is. Hip hop is now pop culture. And hip hop was created by Black folks. It's music. It started with music, but it is an entire culture. And when we accept other folks into that culture, there's a certain code of conduct. Right? So we have white hip hop artists who have excelled in hip hop and have never uttered that word. Beautiful. Moving on. Next question. Chris, you got the microphone? Pardon? Is hip hop rock? Rap? Yeah, I think we called it rap up until about 94. But if anyone's wondering, hip hop does not claim Kanye West anymore. He's a rapper. I got you. So is there another question?
So my husband and I we're churchgoers, and we were thinking the last few years, in the States, just go to a Black church. We hate that thing about, church is the most segregated place in the United States, and so we shouldn't have that. And then recently I've been reading a book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. I don't know if you've heard of that. And all of a sudden I realized, reading that the Black churches are a place of refuge. And so my going to the Black church is not safe. Look how wonderful and great I am. It's an amazing space. So I wonder if you want to comment on that.
I'd approach that with the concept of yes and. Right? Yes, it's a sacred space, but also understanding kind of where things are. I mean, all churches are empty these days, and there's been challenges with membership, and so that's the end, right? So yeah, that's a sacred space. Yet, capital, resources, people, intellectual capital, that's all needed in that space still, right? And so, yes, understand and respect that space as a sacred space, absolutely. But don't let that stop you. Because you know what? No. Under that same thought process, the classroom could have been a sacred space, and I could have chosen not to step in, right? But I did, made myself uncomfortable, and learned some things in the process, right? But did it in an appropriate way where it's, I learned how to do it in an appropriate way where I wasn't acting out all the time, arguing with the teacher. Understand it's the teacher's classroom, James. and let them teach the lesson, right? But at the same time, learning, engaging, it's about, kind of there's a dance to it. And so what I would share to that is that the awareness that that's a sacred space is a key first step before you even think about going into that space. Right? So that awareness is the step. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Yeah.
That I know saying, "Did you buy into my cave?" And they just know they all read me very well.
Yeah, I agree. I grew up in the church. It's been a while since I've gone, and I can get into that. Should you be interested, but that's a better conversation for one-on-one. And it was a historically black church. So when folks who weren't black came into our church, we welcomed them. So, I mean, that's just, and let me be as bold as to say that's just my opinion, right? We're more understanding of, okay, if you're coming into this space, that there's like something's up, right? And so it's more inclined to embrace. But again, I don't have all the answers. We have an esteem who leads a church with us. Do you have any thoughts about it? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh man, I was just looking at this cute baby right here. Just, you're really distracting. That's a great conversation. I don't think there are simple answers. I lead a congregation that I call a Black Revelation church, but there are hardly any Black folks in our church. They look like Sandra. My dear friends and colleagues, I have the highest regard for Reverend J.B. Pickland at Greater Hope Baptist Church, not far from here. I've looked up to his student, and he's been leading his congregation, I'm going to say, maybe 55 years. So he is the longest termed religious leader in South County. I think he's overlooked. I think he's a treasure. With a little bit of bias, I think he's the best preacher in town. And I think he merits some respect and support. We offered to, during the pandemic, they were meeting in their courtyard. And I offered to buy some heaters, but he's a little old-fashioned. He said, "We'll be all right." So they sat out there in the cold. I offered to provide tablets if people wanted to, be online, and he didn't think that they would get with that. So, understandable. So I took all this time to tell you I don't know.
A quick snapshot of what I'll piggyback off. You pointed out, yes, that churches have been like this organizing base, this source of refuge. Tax code prohibits churches and nonprofits, two key organizing elements in the Black community. It prohibits them from engaging in political. Nothing's getting changed unless you engage directly in political activity. My view,